The works of two brilliant men who lived over 100 years ago still have an incredible impact on our lives today. Welcome to another episode of Remnant Stew. I'm Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. Join us today as we explore the lives and works of Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. This is Season 5, Episode 8, Edison and Tesla.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Now think about the last time your home experienced a power outage.
Or powder outage.
Powder outage.
really
Yeah,
tough.
That's bad too.
That's bad too.
Power outage is what we're after this time, though.
But when the electricity's out, do you find yourself like going around into a different room and just flipping on the light, like without thinking about it?
Yeah.
Just flipping on the
all the
light.
time.
Been out for a while, and all of a sudden you're just walking through, and you go click.
Yeah, because it's so
Oops.
we've become so accustomed to having it just flip on and be available to us anytime we just reach out for it, and it becomes a force of habit.
Right.
Most people listening to us right now might find it difficult to explain or even understand how electricity works, but we have certainly become very dependent on it for our use in daily lives. And in fact, when our power goes out, our lives come almost to a dead stop. Like you can't even, I've been in the store before when the electricity
Right.
goes out and you can't check out. Like you
Right.
can't do anything.
And that's really true. And, in thinking about the large scope of human history, the harnessing of electrical power is a relatively recent development, actually. The late 1800s have been coined as the Gilded Age, but it was also a frenzied age of discovery. Inventors like Samuel Morse, Alexander Graham Bell, and Giovanni Marconi were rapidly opening the frontiers of technology. Perhaps the most influential of these electrical pioneers were the two gentlemen that we are discussing today, Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. Though similar in many ways, they took different approaches to their work and even famously butted heads a time or two.
That's right.
Join us now as we take a deep dive into the lives and work of these two brilliant men. Now, I'll say kind of at the outset, I sort of wrote these stories to where they can join at the point where the two men met. But since Edison's 10 years older, that we were going to be a little Edison heavy at the beginning and then Tesla heavy toward the end. Thomas Edison certainly had some interesting grandparents. During the American Revolution, they remained loyal to England. This made them very unpopular with their New Jersey neighbors, and so they relocated to Canada. During the War of 1812, they fought against the American side. Then in the 1830s, Edison's father, Sam Edison Jr., became involved in an unsuccessful insurrection against the provisional government in Ontario. The fallout from this unfortunate event forced Sam to relocate to Milam, Ohio, along with his wife, Nancy. Thomas Alva Edison was born in Milam, Ohio on February 11, 1847. He was the youngest of Sam and Nancy's 7 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. Al, as he was called by his family, was generally in poor health during childhood. An early bout with scarlet fever, as well as numerous ear infections, caused him to have hearing difficulties throughout his childhood and his adult life. When he was 7, the family moved to Port Huron, Michigan, where his father worked in the lumber business. Nancy Edison had been a school teacher before her marriage to Sam Jr. When the family moved to Port Huron, young Al was enrolled in school. However, his hearing problems made rote learning difficult. He was also easily distracted, which won him no favors with his strict teachers. After only 12 weeks of school, his mother pulled him out of school and commenced teaching him at home. Edison said many years later, quote, "My mother was the making of me. She was so true, so sure of me, and I felt I had someone to live for, someone I must not disappoint." Edison loved reading and became well-versed in a wide range of topics. He developed a process of self-education and learning independently that would serve him throughout his life. He was especially fascinated by mechanical devices and also by chemical experiments. In 1859, at the age of 12, Edison convinced his parents to let him take a job selling newspapers and candy to passengers on the Grand Trunk Railroad, which ran from Port Huron to Detroit. One day he noticed that fresh news items were continuously being teletyped to the station office each day. He thought to himself, why sell yesterday's news when I can create my own paper containing up-to-the-minute news? Thus, he got permission to utilize an empty freight car to set up a small press and publish the Grand Trunk Herald. Passengers loved this paper with its up-to-date news. This was during the Civil War, especially. The fresh battlefield news was coming in daily.
And that's crazy. He was only 12 years old doing that.
Mm-hmm.
According to biography.com, this was the first of what would become a long string of entrepreneurial adventures where Edison saw a need and capitalized on the opportunity. Edison used the same rail car to set up an impromptu chemistry lab.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, a chemistry experience on a moving train. What could go wrong? Well, unfortunately, something did go wrong, and the rail car caught on fire. As a result, Edison was kicked off the train and forced to sell his papers at various train stations. Now, there's a rumor that persists even to this day that a conductor boxed him in the ears due to the fire, which further damaged his hearing, but Edison denied that ever happened.
Okay, I've read that. What does boxing of the ears mean? Like where they
hit him in the ear, yeah.
That's very dangerous.
It's
That's very
mean,
dangerous.
yes.
Nevertheless, his hearing had nearly completely disappeared by the time he was 15. He later stated that his lack of hearing was not a problem for him. In fact, he said that it made it easier for him to concentrate on his experiments and research. However, it did likely make social interactions more difficult, and he tended to be shy and solitary in his dealings with others. When he was 15, Edison happened to see the 3-year-old child of a station telegraph operator playing on the railroad tracks. Suddenly, a boxcar became untethered and began rolling toward the child. Acting quickly, Edison dashed forward, swooped up the child, and cleared him off the side of the track just before the boxcar reached him. The boy's father, James McKenzie, was so grateful that he taught Edison how to operate the telegraph as a reward.
That's interesting. I wonder if that was his idea, James McKenzie, or if it was Edison's idea. Like, now I'm in your good graces. Maybe
a combination there,
Yeah.
He probably was always curious about how it worked.
Right. Well, Nikola Tesla was born July 9th or 10th, we're not entirely sure, 1856 in Smiljan in the Austro-Hungarian Empire in what is now Croatia.
Right.
His father, Milutin Tesla, was a priest of the Serbian Orthodox Church. His mother, Duka, we think that it's Duka, was highly intelligent, even though she had no formal education. Her father had also been a priest. The family's ethnic origins were Serbian. Nikola later stated that his mother had a knack for operating and repairing home craft tools and mechanical appliances. He credited much of his creativity and intellect to her.
Oh, go mom! This should be a Mother's Day episode.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Go mom!
As Nikola grew, he demonstrated a remarkable imagination and was very creative. He was extraordinarily observant and could memorize entire books, would store mathematical tables in his brain, and spout poetry all at the same time. So he was thought to have an eidetic memory, which is like a photographic memory.
Right.
Learning new languages was simple for him, which was handy growing up on the multilingual Balkan Peninsula. Nikola was the fourth of 5 children. He had 3 sisters and an older brother who died in a horse riding incident when Nikola was just 5. He entered primary school in Smiljan, where he studied German, math, and religion. After his father took a position in the town of Karlovac, which is close to Zagreb, and I'm sure
Zagreb.
I'm sure I'm butchering all of these.
Zagreb is the capital of Croatia today. Yeah.
Nikola attended high school at Karlovac Higher Real Gymnasium, and gymnasium is a German word for school.
Right.
Classes in his school were held in German, which posed no problem from Nikola. He performed well in high school and can memorize information so completely that one of his teachers accused him of cheating.
Mm-hmm.
After completing high school in 1873, Nikola entered the Polytechnic Institute at Graz, Austria, to study engineering. He quickly established himself as a star student, and one day his physics professor brought in a fascinating new device called a dynamo, which could be operated as a generator or an electric motor. Tesla was fascinated, and he immediately calculated in his mind how the device could be improved.
Of course he did.
That's amazing. I can make it better.
He found himself in an ongoing debate with a professor over perceived design flaws in the direct current, or DC, motors that were being demonstrated in his class. In his mind, he conceived the concept of what would become known as alternating current, or AC.
Right.
Tesla would spend the next 6 years obsessing about the idea of rotating electromagnetic fields and a hypothetical motor powered by alternating current that could and should work.
It's amazing the way certain people's minds work. This
Right?
is what he spent his time dwelling on and thinking on, yeah.
The thoughts obsessed him to the point that he was unable to even focus on his schoolwork.
Mm.
He had always been able to get by on minimal sleep. Like he was an odd duck.
Yeah.
He really was. And he had such crazy sleep schedules.
Right.
But now his sleeping and working patterns were becoming alarmingly bizarre. The university contacted Tesla's fathers with concerns about his health. Nikola convinced his father that he had everything under control, and then he immediately went out and gambled all of his tuition money away.
Oh,
Nothing to worry about here, Dad.
He suffered a nervous breakdown, dropped out of school, and returned home. Then he contracted cholera, which kept him bedridden for several months and nearly killed him.
yeah.
After he recovered, the Austro-Hungarian army came calling on him for service, but Tesla fled into the mountainous wilderness in the interior of the Balkans.
Ooh.
He spent several months hiking, exploring, and hunting in the mountains. He said that this contact with nature made him stronger both physically and mentally.
Yeah, staying out of the army, too. Probably.
Right.
Really kept him
Prolonged
stronger.
his life a
physically.
little.
Prolonged his life.
He also spent hours reading numerous books and later reported that Mark Twain's writings helped him to miraculously recover from his earlier illness.
Oh,
Isn't that
wow.
crazy?
Nice.
Hey, you. Yes, you there listening to this podcast. Have we told you lately just how much we appreciate you? Well, we do. So much. And so can we ask for a favor?
It's an easy favor. If you would, please take just a couple of minutes to give us a review on whatever app you're listening on. It may not seem like a lot, but it really does make a difference.
Yeah, it's all about algorithms, altruisms, Pythagorean theorems, all that techie stuff, which boils down to the fact that it helps other listeners and sponsors find us. So if you enjoy Remnant Stew, it would mean a lot if you took the time to give us a review. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Well, now back to Thomas Edison. In 1862, at the age of 15, Edison was employed as a telegraph operator, or telegrapher, in Port Huron, Michigan. During the next 5 years, he continued working in this capacity, occasionally moving to other locations to fill in for other operators who had gone to participate in the Civil War. In his spare time, he read widely and continued studying and experimenting with telegraph technology and becoming more familiar with electrical science. In 1866, Edison took a position in your old hometown, Louisville, Kentucky, working for the Associated Press. His job on the night shift allowed him to devote more time to his reading and experiments. At the urging of a friend, he relocated to Boston in 1868, where he went to work for Western Union. At the time, Boston was a major center of science and culture. Edison thrived in this environment, and it was here that he received his first patent. One day, while he was sitting in the state capitol building in Boston watching the legislators voting on various bills, he decided that he could devise a faster way of counting votes. Thus, he developed and received a patent for an electrographic vote recorder and register. Though the legislators were impressed with his invention, they didn't like it for practical use. The quick tabulation eliminated the opportunity for last-minute arm twisting to get a fellow member to change their vote. Edison vowed never again to devote time to inventing something that no one wanted.
Right.
It was, though, the first of his 1,093 earned patents.
Wow.
The following year, 1869, Edison moved from Boston to New York City. He had a friend there who worked for the Gold and Stock Telegraph Company. Edison actually stayed in an unused room at this company's headquarters. When Edison managed to fix a broken machine there, he was hired to manage and improve the printer machines. This led to his second patent, an improvised stock ticker called the Universal Stock Printer, which synchronized several stock ticker transactions. The Gold and Stock Telegraph Company was so impressed that they paid him $40,000 for the rights to his patent.
Wow.
That would be the equivalent of $940,000 in 2024 dollars. With this windfall, he quit his job as a telegrapher and devoted his full time to his inventions.
Yeah, you can really create a really cool laboratory with
Yes.
like a
I
secret
would think
lab.
so, yeah.
Right.
Now back to Tesla. In 1881, he moved to Budapest, Hungary, where he became the chief electrician for Budapest Telephone Exchange. In this position, he made significant improvements to the telephone equipment. He also used his free time to play around with his alternating current concept.
Right.
One day while he was walking through a park with a friend, Tesla had a sudden vision. He took a stick and drew in the dirt a motor using the principle of rotating magnetic fields, created by two or more alternating currents. It would still be a couple of years before he had the resources to build one, but when he did, it was based on the same design that he received in this vision.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is very technical, but for a quick and simple explanation about AC versus DC, we turn to a website called matsusada.com, matsusada.com. With direct current, or DC, the voltage always flows in one direction. In contrast with alternating current, the voltage periodically changes from positive to negative and then back again. So the direction of the current also changes. AC goes both ways, so to speak.
Yep.
And with that, let me just, okay, I'm going to take a little aside here. I know that we don't have our trivia challenge anymore, or currently anyway, but I want to talk about AC/DC, the band. Because, so this band, the way they got their name, and it is from AC/DC, alternating current DC. So when they decided to have the schoolboy uniforms as their onstage persona thing,
Right.
Angus Young's sister, Margaret, was making their outfits, making their stage stuff.
Right.
And they noticed the AC/DC thing on her sewing machine. They had been agonizing over a name. And they noticed that, and they're like, yes. And they all agreed on it. And then they started billing themselves as AC/DC, not understanding, not knowing that is another term for maybe bisexual, right? So there was an assumption by a lot of people out there that the band was bisexual. And it wasn't until they got into a taxi cab that the taxi driver asked, so, are you? And they're like, are we what? And he explained to me, no. And so anyway, that's how they got their name.
Well, now back to Edison. He formed a partnership with a man named Franklin Pope. The Pope Edison Company billed itself as electrical engineers and constructors of electrical devices. In 1870, they set up a small manufacturing plant in Newark, New Jersey, where they employed several machinists. They developed and received several patents for improvements to the telegraph. Often these products were for Western Union, but sometimes they were for Western Union's competitors. This is where it gets a little interesting. The invention of a quadruplex telegraph capable of transmitting two signals in two different directions on the same wire at the same time. Edison was supposedly developing it for Western Union. It was actually purchased by the railroad magnate and competitor Jay Gould for $100,000.
Wow.
Well, Western Union sued and ultimately won after years of litigation. In 1871, Edison married Mary Stilwell, who was one of his employees. Though he loved her, their marriage was difficult due to his devotion to his work and also to her frequent illnesses. Nevertheless, their first child, a daughter, Marion, was born in 1873, followed by a son, Thomas Jr., who was born in 1876. Edison nicknamed the two Dot and Dash as a nod back to his days as a telegrapher. A third child, named William, came in 1878, and he didn't get a cool nickname. Too bad, William. In 1876, Edison opened a new lab at Menlo Park, New Jersey. This site became known as the Invention Factory, as several inventions were developed there.
That's right.
At any given time, it was common for numerous inventions to be in the works at Menlo Park, and Edison liked to work long hours, and he expected much from his employees. In that same year, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell was granted a patent for the telephone. While this new invention was terrific, it had its limitations. Using his knowledge as a telegrapher, Edison developed a transmitter that greatly improved Bell's invention. The transmitter made it possible for voices to be heard at a higher volume and with greater clarity over standard phone lines. It was Edison that suggested that hello be spoken when answering the telephone. In December of 1877, Edison utilized what he had learned from his experiments in the telephone and the telegraph to invent the phonograph. It occurred to him that sound could be recorded as indentations on a rapidly moving piece of paper or other material. He developed a machine with a cylinder covered in tin foil. As the cylinder revolved, a needle would make indentations as he spoke through what he called a diaphragm. To his amazement, the machine played his phrase back to him. And what was this phrase? Well, we're going to play it for you right here.
Oh, wow.
Is that his voice?
That is his voice. Okay, that wasn't the original recording. That was that one's been lost. But see, a few years later he went back and re-recorded it. What he had said.
Oh my goodness!
You can find that on YouTube. He created the Edison Speaking Phonograph Company in 1878 to sell the new device, but sales were sluggish at best for the first decade. One of the selling points of the potential was the potential to record the final words of a dying loved one. Mom, after dinner, can we go listen to Grandma die again?
That's so bad.
By 1889, Edison found that using wax cylinders was more durable than those covered in tinfoil, and the innovation made the phonograph more sellable. Now, here's an interesting side note. In that year, 1889, we're getting a little bit ahead of our timeline here, but this is about the phonograph, and I think it's really fascinating. An Edison employee named Theo Wangeman took one of the new devices with him on a tour of Europe. During this trip, he recorded various musical performances as well as the voices of many historic figures. One of these was the voice of a German field marshal named Helmut von Moltke. Von Moltke was born in the year 1800, which is still technically in the 18th century. Mm-hmm. In this recording, he complimented Edison, quote, let's see, he's saying it in German, this is what he was saying, "This newest invention of Mr. Edison is indeed astonishing. The phonograph makes it possible for a man who has already been long in the grave once again to raise his voice and greet the present." Von Moltke is believed to be the only person born in the 18th century whose voice was recorded. Though he's speaking in German, you can also listen to that on YouTube in a video called "The Oldest Voices We Can Still Hear."
Oh, wow.
That's fascinating.
That is pretty cool.
I've never looked it up, but I wonder how, because I knew that phonograph cylinders were made of wax
Right.
at one time, and how that worked with no air conditioning in like Texas.
You would think
or whatever.
they would melt over if you got them really hot, I would suppose.
I don't know. And maybe you couldn't play it when it was a certain
Yeah.
temperature.
Right.
And I know that there's some waxes that are
That would be more sturdy.
Yeah, more sturdy. But
Right.
anyway.
You may have been taught that Thomas Alva Edison was the inventor of the light bulb, but this is not quite true. In 1840, Warren de la Rue, a British inventor, created the first arc lamp, as they were originally called. However, his bulbs were unreliable and expensive. Other researchers included Joseph Wilson Swan, Henry Woodward, and Matthew Evans, who worked to perfect electric light bulbs or tubes using a vacuum, but were unsuccessful in their attempts. Oddly enough, a solar eclipse in July of 1878 played a role in the development of Edison's light bulb. A group of scientists contracted with Edison to create a highly sensitive instrument that could be used to measure the minute temperature changes in heat emanating from the sun's corona during the solar eclipse. Edison called this instrument a microtasometer, which utilized carbon fiber for the sensitive measurements. While visiting with the science during the eclipse, the topic of incandescent light was discussed. Edison announced boldly to the group that he would devise a safe, mild, and inexpensive light that would replace gaslight. All he needed was some investors who were willing to get in on the ground floor of this exciting venture. His reputation as a knowledgeable inventor was growing, and his call for investors got the attention of J.P. Morgan and the Vanderbilt family, who together put up $30,000 for research and development. Edison hired an intelligent young assistant named Francis Upton, who had just earned his master's degree in science from Princeton University. Together, they set about perfecting the way to create a vacuum or sealed space where the current could glow safely. Once this was accomplished, the next task was to find a material that could maintain this glow without burning up.
Right.
The first substance that worked was a platinum thread. However, the expense of platinum made its use prohibitive. Numerous attempts were made with other materials. One of his famous quotes about these attempts goes like this, quote, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways it won't work." Another Edison quote is, quote, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work." Ooh,
That's
that kind of
right.
hurts,
Ooh.
doesn't it?
Yep.
He also coined the term bugs to indicate problems within an invention that needed to be worked out. Finally, Edison remembered the success of the carbon thread that was used in the Eclipse scientific instrument. In mid-October of 1878, the first test of a carbon thread inside the vacuum was attempted. The thread glowed brightly for 13 and a half hours. By December of that year, perfection of the carbon filaments were sufficient to throw a New Year's Eve open house at Menlo Park Laboratory. The entire lab had been illuminated by dozens of the new light bulbs. The press were invited in, and they went wild with enthusiasm, and Edison's investors were thrilled. The Edison Electric Light Company was formed. Immediately, Edison began working on a large-scale system to provide electricity to a large area. Edison predicted, quote, "We are going to make electric lights so inexpensive that only rich people will have candles." The electrical current in the power system was generated by steam engines. Edison himself supervised the laying of the mains and installation of the world's first permanent commercial central power system in Lower Manhattan, which became operative in September of 1882.
Oh, wow.
By the end of that first year, some 400 lights were lit. Then by the end of the following year, in 1883, 513 customers were switching on over 10,000 lamps. The world had entered the lighted era, and Edison was regarded as a great inventor. The success of the electric light brought Edison to new heights of fame and wealth. As electricity spread around the world, Edison's various electric companies continued to grow. In 1889, they were brought together to form the Edison General Electric Company, simply known today as General
GE,
Electric.
or GE. That's
Yeah,
right.
GE.
It's fascinating because not only was he super intelligent and innovative, he was a really good businessman.
He had a good business sense, yeah.
He did.
Sure did.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
I grew up with a tinkerer for an older brother.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Drew was always messing with something. He built a rudimentary mailbox out of 2x4s, a snack shack that he used to sell snacks to the boaters on the lake from, and once he even set up an alarm system rigged to his door so that he knew when me and our little brother Joe were snooping around his bedroom.
Yes.
Pretty ingenious.
Yeah, so this next story makes me think of him, and I wonder if he had had access to some of the same materials, if he had ended up like this. I sure hope not. So David Hahn, that's H-A-H-N, was a 17-year-old Boy Scout in Detroit who'd just gotten pulled over. The officers noted that Hahn was acting a little suspiciously and decided to search his car. David warned them, though. There were radioactive items in the trunk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The officers were understandably flabbergasted and probably a little incredulous, but this kid didn't seem like he was lying. The officers notified federal authorities, and the subsequent investigation found that David had been building a neutron source in his parents' shed, irradiating the entire neighborhood with approximately 1,000 times the normal amount of background radiation.
Wow.
That's no good.
Okay, listen. When somebody tells you they have radioactive stuff, like just believe them. Just go ahead and believe them.
That's not something normally people would just shout out off the top of their head.
So 10 months later, the area was designated a Superfund cleanup site. Superfund with a D
Oh,
at the end,
Superfund.
not
It was
Superfund.
Superfund.
Yeah.
Cleanup site.
Ooh, they were having fun there.
There's different designations, and that one was
Right.
super fun.
Right, and the shed was demolished and buried in Utah amongst other radioactive waste.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Reminder, this takes place in Detroit, so going and transporting that all from Detroit to Utah to bury it with other radioactive material, that's an undertaking.
It's a big deal.
Right.
It's an undertaking. So within those 10 months, though, because it took 10 months to get to that point, within those 10 months, David's mother, who feared losing her house if the full extent of the radioactivity was realized, disposed of most of the radioactive material in the conventional trash.
Oh.
So the full reach of the radioactivity is unknown, though authorities seem to agree that a landfill is a safer place for that material than in the center of a suburban area.
At least she didn't try to flush it down the toilet or the disposal or whatever.
Wow.
Han was left depressed and empty without his hobby. And poor guy.
And less
Maybe
glowy. I
take
mean,
up archery, fishing, something like
Something.
that.
Right.
Amongst some other sad things that happened shortly after the incident that was also depressing him, he was still able to achieve Eagle Scout rank, despite efforts to keep that from happening by understandably outraged neighbors and community members.
He
Now,
was just a curious kid. Come on now.
just a curious kid. Han joined the military, serving in the Navy and Marines, and things were looking up until he was caught years later in 2007 with even more radioactive material in
goodness.
his apartment.
In his
In his
apartment.
apartment.
In his apartment. David had been stealing the apartment complex's smoke detectors for their americium, in an attempt to create another neutron source, located this time in a much more safe freezer compartment instead of a shed.
Oh.
I think he figured that the lead lining of a freezer might protect, or maybe he just saw.
Except when he was trying to open it up to get his taquitos out.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, I wonder if you
Pizza
saw.
rolls, you know.
It's Indiana Jones that survives the nuclear blast.
Right.
And, I'm thinking he
and a lead
probably
lined
got that.
refrigerator.
Yeah.
Right. I'm thinking he got that from
Yeah.
Indiana Jones.
And I think that was a Mythbusters episode too.
Yeah,
Whether that really works.
Right, yeah.
So the authorities arrested him, and Hahn pled guilty to the larceny, and he spent 90 days in jail. Now, unfortunately, David Hahn did pass away just a few years later in 2016 at the young age of 39, ruled as an accidental result of extreme intoxication amongst some other medications that he had been taking.
Oh, so it wasn't the radiation that got him though.
No,
Not directly,
but
anyway.
So did he create his own radiation suit?
no.
I mean,
So I
was he
didn't
just
put
doing
it in the
his
story, but
tennis
he was
shoes and
very
socks?
visibly pockmarked by, radiation. Radiation can lead to your skin breaking out pretty bad, and
Wow.
so
What was his goal?
But it was
Like-
the drugs that killed him.
I don't know. He was, again, not in this story here, but when I read into it, he was fascinated by a series of books. There was one book in particular, and I don't have it noted here, but I guess just the fascination with radioactivity and fission and fusion. And I don't know, maybe he thought he could, revolutionize something. But the infamy of this radioactive Boy Scout and his bizarre story will definitely keep him in my mind for years to come.
Yeah, I'm very glad your brother didn't have access
Because he would have.
because he would have.
He,
And,
yeah.
and you know,
Hey,
One-
man, you using this?
one
using
petty-
this, smoke detector? No.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
One petty argument, and he would have nuked me and Joe.
truth.
Yeah. I got my info from good old Wikipedia and allthat'sinteresting.com.
That's another great website. Now, in 1882, Tesla moved from Budapest to Paris and went to work at the newly constructed Continental Edison Company, which was busily stringing wires and bulbs to further enhance the city of light with Edison's new invention. While working there, Tesla gained a great deal of practical experience in electrical engineering. And in his spare time and using spare parts, Tesla finally built his first induction motor using alternating currents. Ready for a new adventure, in 1884, Tesla boarded a ship for New York. Charles Batchelor, his supervisor at the Paris power plant, gave him a reference letter to help him secure a position with the Edison Company in New York. Part of the reference letter read, quote, "My dear Edison, I know two great men and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Edison hired him. Tesla began working at the Edison machine shop located in Manhattan's Lower East Side. This shop employed over 200 machinists, engineers, and laborers who were working out the process of electrifying the whole city. Beyond their initial meeting, it is thought that Tesla and Edison only met a couple of times. One of those times, according to Tesla, after staying up all night repairing the damaged dynamos on the ocean liner SS Oregon, he ran into Batchelor and Edison, who made a quip about their Parisian being out all night. After Tesla told them he had been up all night fixing the Oregon, Edison commented to Batchelor that, quote, "This is a damned good man." Tesla only worked for Edison for about 6 months, though. They kind of butted heads. What caused their breakup may have just been a misunderstanding, but Tesla believed that Edison had cheated him out of quite a substantial bonus.
Right.
At one point, Tesla overheard Edison quip, quote, "I'd give $50,000 if someone could make these motors work better," unquote. Believing the statement to be true, Tesla set out to do just that. Within a couple of months, Tesla informed Edison that he had made significant improvements to the motors in question. Edison replied, quote, "When you become a full-fledged American, you will appreciate an American joke,"
Oh.
unquote. Tesla did not
Find
appreciate
that
that.
funny. That wasn't
Didn't
funny.
find it funny at all, did he?
And he promptly walked out the door.
Well, as noted earlier, Edison's wife, Mary, was often ill. On August 9th, 1884, she died of what was likely a brain tumor. Edison remarried to Mina Miller in February of 1886. He actually proposed to Mina by tapping Morse code onto the palm of her hand. Well, yeah, what a romantic,
I know, right? It just makes my heart flutter.
yeah. Unlike his first wife, Mina was lively and involved in many community groups, social functions, and charities, as well as trying to improve her husband's often careless personal habits. Bathing was not higher on his priority list, evidently. In 1887, Edison built an industrial research laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, and he also purchased a nearby estate called Glenmont, where he and Mina lived for the rest of their lives. The new West Orange facility consisted of 5 large buildings. The large size of the plant not only allowed Edison to work on any sort of project, but also allowed him to work on as many as 10 or 20 projects at once. While the plant was the primary research facility for the Edison Lighting Company, it was also where he perfected the phonograph and developed new motion picture cameras.
For a while after leaving the Edison Company, the only job Tesla could find was digging ditches. But ideas about motors and magnetic fields continued to just brew in his mind.
Right.
He needed to find a way to demonstrate the superiority of AC current motors. Tesla devised a machine to illustrate the concept. It was an electromagnetic motor that generates the force needed to spin a brass egg and stand it upright. Tesla named the device the, quote, Egg of Columbus.
Oh, I remember that story, yeah.
After the famous story in which Christopher Columbus challenged the Spanish court and investors to stand an egg upright. When they failed, Columbus took an egg and crushed the bottom of it flat so it would remain upright. Columbus was kind of a shyster.
Yeah.
we talked about him telling the natives that if they didn't trade with him,
about the eclipse.
He would take away the sun, and
Proof there it went.
It worked. Anyway, Tesla incorporates this logic in his Egg of Columbus and used it to present his concept of alternating current electricity to investors. And you can look up on YouTube several different videos of how this worked and everything. It wasn't long before word got out that Tesla's AC motor was worth investing in, and the Western Union Company put Tesla to work in a lab not far from Edison's plant.
Still right in the same neighborhood.
That's right. With the encouragement and financial backing of Western Union, Tesla was finally able to construct the AC motors that he had always dreamed about. Quote, "The motors I built there were exactly as I imagined them. I made no attempt to improve the design, but merely reproduced the pictures as they appeared in my vision."
So that vision he had back in Budapest 4 or 5 years
earlier.
Yeah,
that he scratched out in the dirt with a stick.
Same thing that he was able to build then later.
And the motors worked great.
Right.
Tesla was granted a U.S. patent for the AC motor. Well, one of Edison's biggest rivals, George Westinghouse, recognized that Tesla's designs might be just what he was looking for to gain an edge on Edison. In 1888, he hired Tesla and paid him $60,000 in stocks, cash, and royalties for his rights to his patent. This ignited the Battle of the Currents, as Westinghouse promoted AC as better means of conveying electricity than Edison's DC
The
system.
Battle of the Currents. Okay.
That's right. To help show the superiority and safety of the alternating current system, Tesla would give demonstrations and lectures around the country where he would allow electric current to flow through his body to light a lamp. Don't try this at home.
Yeah, well, let's just stay away from that.
and if you look up pictures of Tesla, there's this one famous one where he's sitting in his lab and there's electricity all around him.
Right.
So he knew he was a little bit of a showman too.
Right.
In 1893, Westinghouse used Tesla's AC system to illuminate the Chicago World's Fair.
Oh, we've talked about that one before.
Yeah, we have. The success led to winning the contract to harness hydroelectric power from Niagara Falls. I was going to say Nigeria Falls. Niagara Falls, to promote electricity for Buffalo, New York. These successes, along with years of litigation, convinced Edison that the AC system was superior for electrifying cities.
Now, if you would have just paid him $50,000 when he fixed those
that's right.
motors,
Then they would have worked. I don't know though. They were very different. They were both geniuses, but Edison was very much a businessman and influential and stuff. And Nikola was odd.
Yeah.
Well, you may have heard that Thomas Edison invented motion pictures, but that is also not quite true. In 1888, a Frenchman named Louis Augustin Le Prince used a single-lens camera and a paper strip film to shoot what is believed to be the very first moving film. The images were of some of his friends moving about in a garden in Leeds, England. You can watch this short film on YouTube. Le Prince is credited with being the father of cinematography. However, before Le Prince could embark on a planned publicity tour of England and the United States, he disappeared.
Oh.
They didn't catch it on film?
No. He had returned to France to visit his brother before he was going to embark on this trip to England and the U.S. He purchased a train ticket from Paris to Dijon, but he never arrived. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that have surfaced surrounding his disappearance, including one that involved Thomas Edison, but the mystery has never been solved.
So they had to muster up some other people?
I don't know. Though LaPrince is noted as the first to achieve a motion picture, he was only one of many who were working on the idea. And back in West Orange, New Jersey, Edison studied the works of other inventors. In 1889, he announced that, quote, "I am experimenting upon an instrument which does for the eye what the phonograph does for the ear." By 1891, he applied for a patent for a motion picture camera called a kinetograph and a kinetoscope, which was a peephole viewer. But LaPrince's family challenged Edison's claim to have been the first inventor of motion pictures. LaPrince himself had planned on applying for a U.S. patent before his disappearance. His wife and grown son brought his camera as evidence at the trial, and after months of court wrangling, a ruling was made in favor of the LaPrince family. But then Edison was reapplied for a patent asserting that his camera uses celluloid film rather than paper strips. Edison subsequently received his patent. LaPrince's widow was the driving force behind the theory that Edison had arranged for her husband to disappear.
It might have been a little bit of a case of sour grapes.
Yeah, it could be. But looking at that case, he had a lot of debts, and so there's a lot of people that thought that maybe he jumped in the river, committed suicide.
The
Prince.
The
Yeah,
Prince.
the Prince had a lot of debts. And also, there's another theory that, his brother may have done away with him so as not to divide their inheritance with him. So it's unsolved even to this day. In 1893, Edison constructed the world's first movie studio at the West Orange plant. It was called the Black Maria, which was the nickname of a police paddy wagon, which the studio resembled. By 1894, short films were produced using a variety of acts from the day. Like the electric light and the phonograph before it, Edison developed a complete system, including everything needed to both film and show motion pictures. So it wouldn't do any good just to be able to film them if you couldn't show them to anybody.
Right.
Soon, kinetoscope parlors with peephole viewers were opening in New York and in major cities all over the United States. The popularity of moving pictures drew many competitors, and by the end of the century, the first movie theaters were opening.
Wow.
I love this whole time in American history.
Right.
Have you seen The Gilded Age, the series on Netflix? It's really
I
good.
think I've seen bits and pieces of
Yeah.
it, but
It's a good series.
Now, back to Tesla. The money he made from selling his patent to Westinghouse gave Tesla the resources and time to devote to other projects of his interest. In the summer of 1889, Tesla traveled back to Europe to visit the Paris World's Fair.
Oh, yeah.
This is the same fair that the Eiffel Tower was built for.
It must have been quite an event, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To see that. At this event, Tesla learned of the work of Heinrich
Hertz. Yeah.
who, and you might recognize Hertz, who experimented with electromagnetic radiation or radio waves. Upon returning to the U.S., Tesla began experimenting with the ideas he had learned from Hertz. In this work, Tesla developed a powerful type of wire coil that was capable of generating high voltages and frequencies, and also made it possible to send and receive radio signals. Today, we know these as Tesla coils, and they are still used in radios and televisions and in other communication devices.
You can take a little transistor radio apart. You can see it right there.
It's all there.
The Tesla coil still there.
Now, in 1898, we jumped ahead quite a bit. In 1898, Tesla wowed the public by demonstrating a remote-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
What?
Yes, he called this a tele-automatic control, and it utilized the Tesla coil. The following year, he relocated his lab to Colorado Springs. In another demonstration, he lit 200 lamps from 25 miles away without a wire connection.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
While in Colorado, Tesla made what he regarded as his most important discovery, terrestrial stationary waves. By this discovery, he proved that the Earth could be used as a conductor and made to resonate at a certain electrical frequency. He theorized that this meant that the Earth itself could be utilized to conduct long-distance wireless connections.
So there's actually waves on the Earth, and he discovered this.
Yes. So with this idea fresh in his head, Tesla convinced a group of investors, including J.P. Morgan,
Oh,
to
boy.
fund $150,000 for a giant communications tower.
Mm-hmm.
According to Tesla, once the tower was completed, quote, it will be possible for a businessman in New York to dictate instructions and have them instantly appear in type at his office in London or elsewhere.
Wow, that's way ahead of his time.
Way ahead
Oh,
of
my
his time.
goodness, that's amazing.
Still continuing the quote, he will be able to call up from his desk and talk to any telephone subscriber on the globe. An inexpensive instrument, not bigger than a watch, will enable its bearer to hear anywhere music or song, the speech of a political leader, the address of an eminent man of science, or the sermon of an eloquent clergyman delivered in some other place, however distant.
Wow.
That is amazing.
Tesla's vision for wireless communication indicates that he was like way
Far ahead of his time. Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe, and you know, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there on the internet.
Oh,
I
right.
think there's like
Yeah.
this whole faction of people that think that he actually was Tesla was successful in creating a time. He was a time traveler.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's where he got a lot of his information or his
The Count of,
ideas.
who is it, Phil? The
Count of Saint Germain, baby.
Yeah, there
he
you
is,
go.
yeah.
It was Tesla. A site on Long Island was selected for his tower, and construction began in 1901. However, the money dried up before the tower was completed.
Whoa.
In that same year, 1901, the Italian inventor Marconi made the first successful wireless transmission from England to Newfoundland. The investment money went to Marconi. Tesla complained that Marconi had utilized some of his patents, but the courts ultimately ruled otherwise. It was a humiliating defeat for Tesla.
The tower, I've seen pictures of it, a huge tower. It didn't get completed even as big as it was. And then it sat there for many years and ultimately came down. We have been doing Remnant Stew podcasts for several years now, and we love our listeners. And it's our passion to share crazy and bizarre stories with you. Our continuing goal, however, is to increase our listenership and share our stories with an even larger number of people.
That's right, but growing a podcast audience takes a lot of time and energy. That's where you can help us out. Studies have shown that overwhelmingly, word of mouth is the best promotion tool for the growth of a podcast.
That's right.
So we're asking you to please share Remnant Stew with your friends. Pick out a
Please.
favorite episode and pass it along.
Right.
We would really appreciate it. And thanks so much already for the support that you've given us. We love you guys.
We really do.
Very much so. Well, back to Edison. In the 1890s, Edison became involved in the mining industry. We don't think of Edison as the miner, do we? But he actually was. He applied for and received a patent for a magnetic ore separator, which could extract iron ore from unusable low-grade ores. Though this did not prove to be very profitable, it did help him to procure sources of necessary minerals that would be used in the alkaline storage batteries, which were used to power early phonographs. You know, most homes didn't have electricity when the phonograph first came out. They were actually powered by batteries. By the beginning of World War I in 1914, Edison was supplying batteries for the United States Navy submarines. He was also experimenting with battery-powered cars, and had even formed a company for manufacturing them. In 1912, Henry Ford asked Edison to design a battery for the self-starter, which would be used on the Model T. Remember, the old Model A's have the crank starter, so
Right.
Model T would actually have a self-starter that required a battery, and this led to a mutually profitable relationship between the two men.
Right?
Edison was a visionary concerning solar power. Quote, "I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that."
He'd be interested in politics today.
Yes.
Now, we mentioned earlier that when Tesla was a young man, this is such a funny story. When Tesla was a young man, he spent a great amount of time reading and was especially fond of Mark Twain. Imagine how amazing it would be not just to meet the person you've long admired, but to actually become tight friends with them. Well, that's the true case between Nikola Tesla and Mark Twain. Now, I always think of Mark Twain as living in Missouri, but throughout his life, he lived in a number of places,
Right.
including New York City, just a block away from Tesla. Twain was a frequent visitor to Tesla's lab. He was fascinated by all of the amazing creations the inventor was working on. One day, Twain was watching Tesla work on a series of rotating pistons which were connected to a platform. "It's an earthquake machine," explained Tesla. He thought it might be useful in studying the strength of structures in earthquake-prone areas. And Twain was impressed. But then he mentioned that he had been suffering from digestive problems. It appears that the great writer was greatly constipated. Tesla reasoned that the vibrations from the earthquake machine might help shake things up a bit. So he invited Twain to stand on the platform. Tesla then flipped the switch and the vibrations ensued. In less than 2 minutes, Twain jumped from the platform and ran to the toilet. It worked. I'm surprised he didn't patent that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Edison was active in business throughout his old age and even right up until his death. Though AC became the preferred means of electrifying cities, there was one area in which direct current remained supreme, and that was electric-powered streetcars.
Yep.
These early 1900s means of public transportation were powered by an overhead connection which ran throughout urban areas and utilized a DC system for power. Edison's company was involved in the development of a streetcar system in suburban New Jersey. Despite his frail condition, Edison was at the throttle of the very first electric train to depart Lackawanna Terminal in Hoboken, New Jersey in September of 1930, driving the train's first mile. The streetcar system remained in use until 1984. That's a pretty good return on your investment. A plaque commemorating Edison's inaugural ride can be seen today in the waiting room of the Lackawanna Terminal in Hoboken, which is presently operated by New Jersey Transit. Edison died at the age of 84 on October 18, 1931. His wife, Mina, announced the death to the world by turning off all the lights in their home, Glenmont. The following night, cities all around the world briefly shut off their lights in honor of Edison. In Japan, a sect of Shinto believers worship Thomas Edison as the god of electricity.
Didn't know that.
Of course,
Wow.
there would be that.
Well, Tesla never fully recovered from the loss of wireless communications patents to Marconi. He had to sell the property where his incomplete tower stood in order to pay off debts. He began a pattern of living in hotels in New York, racking up charges, and then moving on to the next hotel, leaving the charges unpaid.
Oh, kind of falling on hard times. Wasn't
Yeah, he really did. And his mental health wasn't the best.
he? Yeah,
He developed an obsessive relationship with pigeons.
with pigeons.
Oh, no.
With pigeons. At
Well,
first,
that's a different wireless communication.
Yeah, I
there you
guess.
go.
Yeah.
At first, he would walk to the park each day to feed them. Then he began feeding them from his hotel window. Quote, I have been feeding pigeons, thousands of them for years, but there was one, a beautiful bird, pure white with light gray tips on its wings. That one was different. It was a female. I had only to wish and call her, and she would come flying to me. I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me.
Ooh.
As
That's a little weird now.
Yeah.
It is. It's right there in Weirdville. As long as I had her, there was purpose in my life, he said.
That's a bit foul.
One day, this pigeon showed up with a broken wing and leg. Tesla spent over $2,000 caring for this bird, including building a special harness to keep her comfortable while she healed. Throughout his life, Tesla allowed himself only a few close friends, including Mark Twain. Though popular with women, Tesla never married. He was 6'2" and maintained his weight at less than 150 pounds.
That's not right. I'm sorry. How do you do that?
He's a really good-looking man.
Yeah.
He was an elegant, stylish figure and was also described as having light eyes, very big hands, and remarkably big thumbs.
Wow.
He became obsessed with cleanliness and fixated on the number 3. He began shaking hands with people and washing his hands, all done in sets of 3. He had a little bit of OCD. He had to have 18 napkins on, and well, maybe not a little, maybe a lot. He had to have 18 napkins on his table during meals and would count his steps whenever he walked anywhere. He claimed to have an abnormal sensitivity to sounds as well as an acute sense of sight, and he later wrote that he had, quote, a violent aversion against the earrings of women, unquote. Today, he might have been categorized as a high-functioning autistic.
Yeah.
Tesla's unpaid bills, combined with complaints about the pigeon mess, caused him to be evicted by the St. Regis Hotel in 1923, the Hotel Pennsylvania in 1930, and the Governor Clinton Hotel in 1934. Word of his financial troubles reached the decision-makers at Westinghouse, who then helped him to secure a room at the Hotel New Yorker in 1934. The Westinghouse Corporation paid for his room and board at the New Yorker and a monthly stipend of $125 for the rest of his life.
Nice of them.
That was very nice of them.
That's amazing.
In 1931, on his 75th birthday, a party and press conference was held between Tesla and members of the media. At this first party, Tesla received congratulations from Albert Einstein, as well as other prominent scientists and political figures. He was also featured on the cover of Time magazine. The caption read, quote, "All the world's his powerhouse." The birthday party press conference was so popular with the press and with Tesla that it was repeated then every year.
Yeah.
Members of the press found Tesla to be engaging, and they loved hearing the details of his past inventions. But they also began to be somewhat amused and baffled by some new devices that he claimed to be working on. In 1932, he said that he had developed a motor that ran on cosmic rays.
Oh, I'd like to see that one.
Right? And maybe he did invent that time machine. In 1933, he claimed that he had developed a way to photograph the retina to record thought.
Oh, well, there's a good trick.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Then in 1934, he told reporters that he had developed a death ray for national defense. There's no evidence that Tesla actually invented any of these items, but diagrams of some of them were found in his notes. By 1937, he was claiming that he had received messages from other planets. It's going down a little bit.
Going down the
Downhill.
hill a little bit.
Oh, no.
One night in the fall of 1937, Tesla left the Hotel New Yorker after midnight to walk to the nearby cathedral and park in order to feed the pigeons.
Right.
He was struck by a taxi cab and thrown hard to the ground. His neck was badly wrenched and he had 3 broken ribs. He refused medical help, but he never fully recovered. He died in his room at the Hotel New Yorker on January 7th, 1943, at the age of 86. 5 days later, New York Mayor LaGuardia led some 2,000 mourners in a state funeral in Tesla's honor. The following day, a religious service was held at the Serbian Orthodox Cathedral in New York. Tesla's body was cremated, and years later, his ashes and all of his personal effects, including his designs and notebooks, were sent to Yugoslavia. Today, they are on display at the Nicholas Tesla Museum in Belgrade, Serbia.
Right.
Throughout his life, Tesla was granted at least 278 patents. He claimed to have over 300, but that can't be verified.
Right.
And that pales in comparison to Edison, really. Though he never had the business sense of Edison and Westinghouse possessed, his brilliant contributions to the world of science lives on today. The device you're listening to us was likely charged with an alternating current power supply.
Right.
Tesla's notes and drawings are still inspiring engineers and inventors today.
Right.
Information for this episode was obtained from biography.com, mps.gov, Britannica.com, and many others.
Right.
There's a long list of sources.
Yes.
And all of that is located in the transcript of this episode on our website, and there's a link to it in the show notes.
Phil here reminding you to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at Remnant Stew Podcast. Drop us an email at staycurious@remnantstew.com just to say hi or to let us know about any topics you would like to hear us cover in an upcoming episode.
Remnant Stew is a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. Steve Meeker researches and writes each episode that we then host together. Our audio producer is Philip Sinkfeld. The Oddity du Jour is brought to you by Sam Lamp. Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod with voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks goes out to Judy Meeker, who helps with research.
Yeah.
For a complete list of resources, like I said in this episode, see the episode's transcript.
Well, now before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head over to Apple Music and leave us a review. We love reading those reviews. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, your family, your local electrician, and your electric company. Why not? Until next time, let's choose to be kind and always stay curious.